on the C-suite scale, where executive minds unpack the real stories behind business growth. Today I'm joined by Amjed Aboukhadijeh, who is the VP of Sales at Socket. Welcome, Amjed.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And great pronunciation of the last name.
I had a great teacher.
Yeah, yeah. The just so that anyone that's watching this understands, yeah, I told Brenda that just think like you're booking a DJ for a party. So it's a book a DJ because I've got quite a bit of silent letters in the last name, but that makes it a lot easier. So
Yeah.
nicely done.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, appreciate it. Talk to me a little bit about what you do over at Socket.
Yeah, sure. So I'm the vice president of sales at Socket. Socket, we're a cybersecurity solution. Really, what we do is we look at all of the open source code that companies are using, and we scan it for risks. So we look for, vulnerabilities within the code, but we also help detect and prevent supply chain attacks from happening for our customers. So we look for, malicious patterns, malicious install scripts, backdoored packages, hijacked packages, things like that. So that's what we do. We help protect companies. Yeah, I've been at the company about 3 years. We're growing super fast. It's like every week there's something new. It's kind of crazy. I know we'll get into some of it today, but yeah, that's a little bit about me and myself.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, talk to me a little bit about your journey. Okay, so you've been with the company for 3 years. I guess more so the journey with Socket. How did Socket get started and the vision for it?
Yeah, absolutely. So Socket was founded by Faraz Aboukhadijeh. Surprise, surprise, he's my older brother, which is pretty cool. It's been really fun working with family. I'm not a co-founder, just to be very clear. I'm just an employee. I've had the opportunity to be very early on in the organization, which has been really fun. It was like kind of the meshing of the perfect world. My older brother, he's sort of a very prolific open source maintainer. He authored some of the most popular open source packages in the world. He gets about 1 billion downloads a month on the code that he wrote. And this is, keep in mind, just free code that he put out for the world, for anyone in the world to use. Um, and, uh, and then, for myself, I've always had this background in enterprise sales, right? B2B. I've worked at many organizations like Google and Oracle, some large companies. I've also been, the first AE seller at several startup companies. So, it was just a great opportunity to kind of join forces. But in terms of how the company got started, it was founded by Faraz. He's the sole founder. Being an open source maintainer, he's kind of lived a lot of like, sort of the problems, right, that can come with open source. Now, it's amazing in many ways because essentially you've got this free code online that anybody can go grab and download and put directly into their application. So it actually helps them get their products to market a lot faster. So open source is incredible. In fact, it's being used so heavily today. About 80 to 90% of the code inside an application today is made up of open source code. So just to kind of give you an idea of the scale, like it's being used tremendously, right, by all these organizations. But it comes with some risks, right? You're essentially relying on code written by a bunch of random people around the world that you've never met before. And so, we hear about all these crazy supply chain attacks that are happening in the news, and a big portion of those are sort of derived from, open source. And so, for us, our CEO and founder saw that this was a problem and recognized that the tools today were not designed to actually be able to preemptively detect and block these types of attacks. It was sort of very reactive until like the whole community knows about the issue. There's really no tool that was able to sort of prevent these things from happening. And so he just thought there's got to be a better way to do this. And so we started Socket, and here we are 3 years later. Or actually, it's actually been about 4 years at the company. I joined about 3 years ago. So, and yeah, we're growing very quickly. So it's been a fun ride.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. That's great. And talk to me about the family dynamics and working with your brother. Is there any challenges that you have to navigate through?
I mean, he's the boss. If he doesn't respond to me, though, I call my mom and I say, Mom, Frost isn't responding to me. So then my mom will have to call him. I'm mostly kidding, but I did have to do that a few times. So yeah, no, it's been great. I mean, like I said, I mean, it's his baby. He started the company, but he's done a really good job of making sure that everybody feels correct ownership within the organization. It's not just myself, but it's really everybody. It's the early engineering team. It's the early sales team. Everything. everybody really gets the opportunity to kind of speak up and really like share their feedback around like where we could be improving. Ross is very receptive to feedback, and I think he's just done an excellent job running the company. We've been very successful since day one, and so I think a lot of that has to do with number one, the idea, the product, and the problem we're solving. But I think secondly, it's the team, right? We've done a lot with sort of the small team we have relative to what we've accomplished. We're still only about 60 employees, which is pretty incredible. Typically, companies, would be maybe 5 or 6x in employee size doing what we've been able to do, in terms of like our customer base and things like that. So we're really proud of that, and I think that's like just really stems from sort of like his vision for the company and like the expectations he has for folks. But yeah, the dynamic's been great. I mean, it's really cool. It's like I think if anything, um, it makes me more excited to wake up, right? Because I get to not only do something I love, like I love sales, and I know I want to spend my whole career here, but also, I get to do it with somebody I care a lot about, right? So it's like I give you that little extra incentive, right, to kind of just do everything right. So it's been really good.
Yeah, it sounds like the perfect combination of talent, with you being the in sales and then he's the brains behind everything. And so, not to say you're not the brains, of course.
Oh, fair. That's fair. I'm not the brains. That's fair. Less brains, less brains, more talking. Yeah.
Yeah, too funny, too funny. Well, Socket clearly has a strong competitive differentiation from others in the market. Talk to me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll try to keep it in simplest terms, just so that for anyone that's watching, like if they're not like super in this space, can understand. I'll give an example, right? So say I want to start a business, and let's just say a chiropractor business. I just went to the chiropractor, so let's just use that as an example. So let's say I want to open up a chiropractor shop. Well, I've got to create my website, right? I've got to do, I want to make sure I have like a landing page where people can go and visit the site and book time to come in and schedule an appointment. As I'm building my website, maybe I hire an engineer or something to help with this. I need a place where somebody can like schedule an appointment, right? They need to pick the date, the time, etc. Now, if I'm going to go and if I'm going to go and build that, like, am I really going to do it from scratch, or am I going to go and search online and see has someone else already written code to input a calendar widget on the website? I mean, it's got to have been done thousands of times. And so what I'll do is I'll go to one of these websites that sort of house all of the open source code. There's different ones. There's like NPM, for example, if you're writing in JavaScript code. There's PyPy if you're writing in Python code. And I'll go and I'll sort of search for what I'm looking to accomplish, and I'll get a list of packages, open source packages they're called, which are basically packages that contain the code inside it to actually be able to build the feature that I'm trying to build. And I'll search and I'll find, oh wow, I can just pull this calendar widget in and I can use it on my website. Why would I write it from scratch? So that's sort of like how people utilize open source. Now, what happens when, and this is a very silly example, but again, very basic, right? This is obviously at the scale of, big banks using Socket and things like this, but I'm just giving
Yeah.
kind of one small example.
Sure.
But now let's say a customer comes to my website and they try to book and the calendar widget doesn't work. And then I go and I do some research and I find out, why isn't it working? And then I find out I used a calendar widget that only works for people that live in a certain time zone in the world. Maybe it's like East Coast, but my office is in the West Coast and I didn't account for that. And so there's a bug, there's an issue with the open source code, right? And so what'll happen is somebody will report the bug. The maintainer, the open source maintainer, who's just a person, right, who wrote this code and put it up online for free, will get that report and they'll say, oh shoot, I need to account for different time zones, for example. And then what they'll do is they'll put out a new version of their package, an updated version, which fixes the issue that was reported, right? And so the previous version might have been 1.0.1, and now I've just released a new version called 1.0.2, right, which now accounts for that fix. So that's called a vulnerability. That's called a vulnerability or a mistake, right, within the code. And the way that the tooling out there today, what it does is it reports on these vulnerabilities. So it tells you, hey, you're using this package. Did you know there's an updated version that you should be using, right? And it kind of reports these vulnerabilities to customers. So we do that as well. That's a very good baseline. It kind of accomplishes somewhat of the problem. The challenge with that, right, and the reason why Socket came to life is a couple of things. Number one, that is extremely noisy. I gave one
Mhm.
example, but now go think about like a Facebook, right? Or an Apple, right? A company at this scale. The number of vulnerabilities that they're getting on a daily basis or an hourly basis is just mind-boggling. I mean, we're talking about thousands, tens of thousands, right? And to go and actually fix every single one of those is not an easy task. It's a massive, you know, it's a massive lift. It costs a lot of engineers, a lot of engineering time. And the problem with it is most of the vulnerabilities don't actually meaningfully improve your security posture. They just are like mistakes that they're not going to lead to a compromise. They're not going to lead to like a major leak or a breach that's going to cause, a bunch of money to your organization. It's like a minor fix. You have a lot of time to fix them. And so what we do is we help teams prioritize which ones they actually need to focus on based on which of the vulnerabilities could actually cause real harm to the company. So we focus on prioritizing that for the team. That's one side of the equation that we fixed. And we do that very well. So we really help kind of cut down on the noise is a way of thinking about it. And we do that by about 80% reduction in
Wow.
noise. So it's a huge, huge value add. And then the second
Great.
side of the equation is what about all of the issues with inside those packages that don't get reported by the community? So I just gave you an example where I discovered the issue and I reported it. But what happens when someone doesn't report it, but there could still be an issue in there? And in fact, most of the time, that's how supply chain attacks happen. There's like a backdoor put into a package. Nobody discovers it until it actually compromises a company, and then it becomes like a mainstream story. And so what we do is we actually are able to detect those by looking at the behavior of the code ahead of time to determine if it's something that is actually going to be potentially a risk to you, like a major risk. And we can prevent those risks from ever happening. So it's two parts. It's cutting down on all of the noise, all of the backlog you have, but also telling you about a bunch of other risks that the other tools don't even detect. Hopefully that makes sense. I mean, it's a very technical product, but hopefully that makes sense in terms of like, why we came to life and the problem we're solving.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. You gave a really great description of it and how you've leveled up a current gap in the market, if you will.
Cool.
So
Yeah.
you definitely have. So talk to me a little bit about how you've gone and scaled the company, protected the brand throughout just the past 3 years.
Yeah, so we've scaled very carefully, like I said. I could speak mostly to the kind of the go-to-market side of things, and maybe I could touch on some of the other aspects. It's really the same philosophy, sort of across the board. We have a level of criteria that we expect, in order to work at Socket. Like we sort of have a standard, right, that we hold people to, and the bottom line is, if we interview people and they're above the standard, great, right? But we really don't want to um, we don't want to hire for the sake of hiring. You see this a lot, right? Company goes and raises $100 million, and now they have to kind of grow into this new valuation that they got, and so they just start hiring across the board. They hire more engineers, they hire marketing people, they hire salespeople, but there wasn't like a ton of thought given into what is this person going to be doing, and like, is that actually worth it? And so then you see these companies 2 years later having to make these massive rifts, right, and let go of people. And it's a very avoidable problem. Not always, but most of the time it is. And that's the situation we want to put ourselves into is, we don't want to let people go. We don't want to have to like do anything like that. So we want to be very smart and careful for the business. Um, so on the go-to-market side, I can walk through the process. I mean, it's very simple. I did another talk about this one time, and it was kind of funny. I had a lot of salespeople reach out to me, and they're like, I really want to apply for Socket, but I'm kind of intimidated after I heard your interview process. But it's I'm very proud of it. It's a very comprehensive interview process. I'll skip through 90% of it. The one part I'll talk about is our presentation. So, it's pretty typical as for a sales role that you'll go through some sort of a presentation phase in the as you know, right? And usually it's like something simple, like go present on your deck, like do a intro call or presentation on the deck or whatever. That's like sort of an aspect of our presentation, but it's really more focused on like the sort of the evaluation phase. I mean, I feel like it's pretty table stakes that if you've been selling at a company for 2, 3 years, you should know the intro deck. And so, like, what does that really tell me? What I want to know is, can I go throw you, Brenda, into a boardroom with a bunch of executives at Capital One, or can I go throw you in a boardroom with a bunch of executives at Apple, and can you hold your own? If you're there to go kick off a POC, are you going to be able to really project manage this to the finish
Mhm.
line? And so the presentation is really focused on sort of that POC kickoff phase, walking through the mutual evaluation plan, right? Walking through all of the steps, handling objections, right? Really being able to kind of like confirm all of the people that are involved in the project, what their purpose is, how is the decision going to be made, what is the criteria that we're going to be tracking, actually getting the app installed, enabled, things like this. So it's very comprehensive from that standpoint. And that's what's really, I think, been able to hold us to that high bar is like, I always joke about it, but I've never met a salesperson that hasn't hit 200% of their quota. I mean, I've seen so many resumes to this point. It's like, oh, 180% of Q1, 220% of Q2. And it's like, okay, well then why don't I just hire you right now? Clearly you've never missed. And like, that's like great. That's one aspect of it from a screening standpoint, but like, I got to see it in action. Right. And so that's kind of like the purpose of the presentation.
Yeah, that's brilliant because, people can interview well otherwise, but then how do they actually perform when they're in the role? So,
Exactly. Yeah.
brilliant. Well, when you're obviously going through a lot of growth and you're having to hire, that's because you have the growth to support those new hires. So, how are you going about finding new customers and new clients?
Yeah, so we have a couple of things. We've grown tremendously through word of mouth. That's the great part is customers are really happy with our product, and so they've got a buddy or a friend over at another company, and they say, "Hey, you should check out Socket." So that's been great. I think that just stems from doing good business, setting expectations properly, what your product can and can't do, but also being there to support them. That's something we take really seriously. We have, I think, been in a lot of startups, been in a lot of companies, strongest support I've ever seen because we have a lot of touch points and we make sure people get sort of that white glove service. So that's one aspect of it. But, like squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? Like you have to talk to people. You have to go out and pitch yourself. Like if you're not going to try, you're not going to win. And like, um, we have a tremendous culture built around outbound. And we do it in a very tasteful way. Yes, we cold call people. Sometimes we call them on their cell phones. Sometimes they get upset. That's kind of the name of the game. But we don't just call you to, necessarily spam you with like information about why we're better. There's usually a value add that we tie to it. For example, like, we're going to be at this event, and it might be an event that everyone goes to in security, like RSA or Black Hat, and we're hosting like a pretty cool event. Like the event might be something like, we do a bunch of like underground security talks that like, people in this space, they care a lot about these kinds of things. Like they want to hear from, their colleagues that are, well known in the industry giving talks. And so we'll host these events and then we'll sort of invite people to it. And then what happens is they come to these events and then they see, oh, like who are the sponsors of this? And they're like, oh, Socket, what does Socket do? And then they kind of learn about it and they're like, whoa, that's really cool. Like you must be better than the product we're using. Like I'd love to see a demo. And so it kind of grows organically like that. But a lot of those invitations are driven from outbound. So we hold the sales team to a very high standard of, outbound. As a team, I mean, we have 6 SDRs today. We're probably doing 1,000 cold calls per week per SDR.
Wow.
So it's a lot of freaking dials. It's a lot of work, but again, it's like there's usually an event tied to it, an
Yeah.
invitation to a dinner, invitation to an event. So that's kind of been the strategy.
I love that. That's great. Well, let's pivot a little bit over to talking about AI. It's obviously blowing up right now, has been for quite some time. What kind of are the major trends that you're specifically seeing around AI, digital transformation in your space?
Yeah, so I can talk to it a little bit. I won't pretend to know more than I do. So just to make sure I understand your question, by the way, correctly, are you talking more so like how have we leveraged AI in our product to help, address problems that the market has, or more so like in my day-to-day job, or both?
Well, I would say so. The question, I guess, what I'm more curious about is the customers and clients that you're working through. They're obviously encountering situations with AI, and there's an increased security vulnerabilities with that introduction. Are you
Yep.
noticing any of that with your current
Oh yeah.
customers?
Oh yeah, an immense amount. Yeah, for sure, right? Because basically people are using like ChatGPT and different LLMs to write code. So a developer, doesn't write code from themselves anymore. Like they'll ask AI to help them generate a command that they can
Yeah.
just run. And, with AI tools, like they're trained on this data from the past 10 to 15 years. And so a lot of times what we're seeing is like AI tools actually recommending open source packages to developers that they should be using that are actually vulnerable or malicious in some
Right.
cases. So they're telling you go use this package to go solve what you're trying to do, but they're like recommending you a package that's going to cause a huge issue. And so it's very important that Socket gets into that developer's workflow, in their workflow. AI is very powerful, right? So we don't want to basically tell people don't use AI because that would be silly. Instead, what we want to do is we want to meet the developer where they're working. So we've developed what we've called like the Socket web extension, which actually embeds our analysis directly in line. So if a developer is searching, let's say in ChatGPT, or sorry, writing code in ChatGPT, and it's recommending a package, if you hover over that install command, Socket will just tell you what the risks are inside it. So we are actually meeting developers exactly where they want to work, whether it's in AI, whether it's in their traditional workflows, it doesn't matter. I think that's the key, right? It's not to fight where the industry is going, but
Yeah.
rather meet the developer where they're working.
I would almost think that that would help open up the conversation more easily with your prospects.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's been a big game changer. I mean, people come to us and they're like, "Hey, we're really concerned with developers writing code in AI now. What do you have to help?" And and that's where we're able to really kind of differentiate ourselves.
I love that. I love that. And then, as far as internally, have you been also to stay ahead of the curve implementing your own AI solutions?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I feel like everything nowadays claims to have AI in it.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, every tool. I mean, we use like the kind of the traditional, sales tools you would expect, like Gong and whatnot, right, to kind of record our meetings and give us the AI summaries and stuff, which are great. Um, but where I've really leveraged it is to kind of help streamline some of the monotonous tasks that you get as a seller. Like a lot of times, customers have questions, and it's like a lot of times it's the same type of questions, right? Written in a different way. And so ChatGPT can really help me sort of write some of these responses and help the team write these responses. So that's kind of an obvious, application of it. The other one I'll mention, which I think is really cool, ChatGPT now has the ability to integrate different sales tools into the platform.
Right.
So I added in like HubSpot, for example, as a source in ChatGPT, and so I can literally just talk to it like a human, but it's a robot, and I can just ask it questions about my pipeline. So I could be like, "Hey, based on industry averages, how much are we going to bring in this month?" And then like, "What do you mean by that? Like, explain to me. What are the risks? Like, based on the notes and the opportunities, like, what are the risks?" I mean, it's super cool. Like, it will literally write stuff out. So from my perspective, it helps a lot, especially as I, would prepare for like a board meeting or something like that, where, I want to kind of guess what they might be asking me. I can kind of
Right.
come prepared. It also helps build reports. Like you can literally tell it, "Hey, build me this report," and it'll go and do it. So things like that, heavy manual work. I feel like if you're not using AI, like, as a sales leader, like you're definitely going to be falling behind for sure.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. I know that there's also human interaction to this. So, how often are you having to check it and cross? Have you ever caught it to be wrong?
Um, Yeah, wrong in the sense of like, if I have it like sort of take a stab at a response, like sometimes it's just cheesy and like so obviously written with AI, where it's like, dude, I would never say that. Like, why would I'm definitely not going to send this email. And so I think, yeah, you definitely, at least at this point in AI, like we should be proofreading what
Right.
we're sending. So I'll proofread everything for sure.
Absolutely. Well, what would you say the one thing is that you have to get right to meet your next set of growth goals within the company?
Yeah, I think the most important thing that I'm thinking about right now is how do we enable the sales team to be able to perform at the same level that the existing team has been able to. And the reason I say that is because in the early days, like people got to spend a lot of time with me and a lot of time with Ross, our founder. So there was like that invaluable sort of interaction and like the learning you get from just like being an early employee, like
Yeah.
but you don't get that anymore, right? Like I don't even get, like I said, I have to ask my mom to reach out to my brother if I want to get time with him. So it's like I don't even get enough time with him. And
Right.
so like how do you hire someone new? Maybe they're not even coming from the security space, right? But they're like an excellent seller in another industry. How do you get them ramped up? And so from my perspective, I'm thinking about really creating this like repeatable motion where like in the first 30 days I can, have sort of a set of curriculum that folks go through. But I'm trying to level it up from like what you would expect a traditional enablement program be. It's not like just get onboarding, like get your gusto and your benefits. I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is like more so almost requiring sellers to have like a certification in socket,
Mm-hmm.
meaning they can go in, they can do the pitch, they can present on this, they can do a demo, all these different criteria, having them like, sort of requiring them to present it and get it checked off by some peers in the company,
Yeah.
saving the recording, almost like in a portal where we can track all of this. So as a
Mm-hmm.
manager, right, you can ensure that the people you're hiring are actually following through this entire enablement program. So that's very top of mind for me, especially as we approach to kind of scale going into 2026.
Yeah, that's really smart, especially knowing that, if you implement that, you can be confident that when they pass that, they are going to represent the company the way you want them to represent the company. And they're going to be, um, answering the right questions. So I think that that's really smart.
Exactly. Yeah. Already, we'll maybe hire someone from a competitor or a similar space, and they'll go
Hmm.
in, and I can hear that they're flavoring in some of the stuff about socket, but they're still like kind of doing a lot of their old pitch. And I'm like, hey, wait a minute, like we should all have the same talk track because you're misrepresenting, right? We don't want to make sure people are misrepresenting. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's super exciting. Well, loved having you on the show today. Is there anything else that you would like to share with other people that are on your same journey?
No, I mean, I appreciate your time, and thank you for having me on. I love doing this. It's always a good chance to kind of like reflect on, I mean, you ask me good questions, and sometimes they seem straightforward, but it's like really good
Yeah.
way of forcing me to kind of go through it all in my head. And I mean, like for example, you just asked me that last question about what am I thinking about as we scale, and quite frankly, like I hadn't really thought about it like that, and just thinking about it out loud, helps a lot. So, um, I guess if there were any advice I can give, to anybody in this that's in this role that's kind of getting to the point of where they're like scaling the sales team, and I would say, you know, don't not necessarily don't do it too fast because if the business needs it, you might have to, but don't go from 0 to 100 in terms of one day you might be a player coach and then all of a sudden you now have these large goals. And so you have to hire like not only more sales reps, but more sales managers.
Mhm.
And like, don't get too removed from the trenches. Stay in the trenches as
Mhm.
long as you can or longer than you think you need to.
Mhm.
Um, because it changes a lot. Like it changes a lot and it can change quickly. And if you don't have that context that the sellers are having, you're going to make poor decisions in leadership
Mhm.
roles. And so for myself, I try to stay very involved, as many meetings as I can join. Even if I'm
Mhm.
not presenting or doing the talking, I just want to sit in to see what is changing. Like you said, AI, right? Like the
Mhm.
questions we're getting now are very different than we got 2 years ago. And
Sure.
so I just want to make sure, that sales leaders do that because it is important. Because when you start deciding on like, product roadmap things and stuff, if you haven't been in the trenches in 2 years, you're going to be basing all of your decisions off of what you remember when you were in the trenches. And like you got to be aware of what's relevant, especially in this industry, cybersecurity. It's always changing. So that would be the one advice I would give.
I love that. I love that. Well, how can people reach out to you or Socket if they're interested in learning more?
Yeah, I think the easiest way for me nowadays is LinkedIn.
Mhm.
I think, yeah, shoot me a LinkedIn message. I guarantee you I'm the only Amjed Aboukhadijeh in the world, so it would be very easy to find me.
Love that. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your insights and joining the show today, Amjad.
Of course. Thanks, Brenda. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks.